Good afternoon, everybody. Am I audible at the back? Good. Thank you. So, starting right after lunch, you have the challenge of your half of your audience going to sleep. So let's see if I rise up to the challenge of preventing you all from going to sleep. I am a consultant, I'm a management consultant. I am a partner with the data science team of BCG India. BCG, by the way, stands for Boston Consulting Group and not Global. So I have done various roles in my life. I've been consulting with a lot of Indian clients now, but for the 7 years before that, I was in industry. Before that, about 10 years back, I used to run a startup trying to sell analytics services and platforms, primarily to clients in the US, sometimes to clients in India. And then we had a lot of problem with traction with clients in India. I mean, they really did not believe in the value that analytics could bring. They believed that domain understanding, along with some very simple MIS, was good enough to do their business. I left the consulting business after that, then went to industry and I worked for Flipkart and Myntra, so the digital native organizations really saw how these were engineering-led, data-driven organizations. So you really didn't have to convince people. There was a supply problem rather than a demand problem. Everybody was asking for more than we could provide. I come back into servicing Indian industry, consulting with Indian industry, and it's been a happy shift in these 7-8 years. I see a lot of serious investments done by Indian corporates, and primarily I deal with financial institutions, CPG companies. So I'm talking about offline businesses and corporates, not really the fintechs and the other internet companies. And there are clearly a pack of pioneers who are moving ahead in terms of the level of investments that they have done and the level of investments the level of ROI that they're able to get out of their data investments, right? There is a second cohort which has not made investments yet, but is kind of dipping their toe in and wondering about whether they should go ahead and invest crores of rupees over the next 3-4 years and whether it's going to be. And there's a third group which has made a lot of investments and is terribly upset about the fact that they've done it because they're not generating any results out of it. So now I'm an analyst. By nature, when I started looking at this, my brain started looking for patterns, right? So that's what I wanted to share here, my observations on what successful data practitioners in the Indian market have done and what can we learn from it. Again, I would say these are my observations, this is not my company's POV. So as with everything, right, we start with the org. And when I look back at what these guys who are getting most out of their investments, it basically is the organization, right? So the first thing in the organization is getting a really good chief data and analytics officer, a really senior person, a person that gets a seat at the table with the rest of senior management, a person whose point of view is heard, and very importantly, typically a person from that industry. Because one of the problems that analysts, analytics teams, data science teams, etc. have had in the past is being considered sort of ivory tower academicians and not practitioners in the business sense, right, who are building solutions which do not necessarily solve a particular business problem, but are more fascinated by the acuteness of the solution itself. Once you get that leader in, it's very, very essential to make sure that the organization does not treat the data team as a support function. It treats the data team as an integral function which has a seat at the table, has a say in greenlighting product launches, greenlighting marketing investments, and other areas where you actually want to see data-backed ROI kind of calculations, right? Then I further looked at what successful organizations were doing, and a couple of things was very clear to me. There are various ways in which you can structure your data science and analytics org. You can make it completely centralized, which is one team, every single analyst of whatever shape or form, data analyst, data scientist, business analyst, whatever you call them, right, reporting analyst, sits in that one central team, reporting into one central structure outside of the regular business teams. The other extreme is complete federation, where there is no central team, there is no head of data analytics. Every team, marketing has its own team, and finance has its own team, and supply chain has its own team, and product has their own team, and so on and so forth. successful organizations are leaning towards centralization. They're not leaning towards federation. Right? They're leaning towards centralization with slight amount of federation. I'll kind of come to that where they are decentralizing. The second thing that they're doing, and this is where probably this is very counter to me when I come from a tech org, where the data engineering org, which is the guys who are bringing in the raw data and converting it into analyzable data, managing the data platform, managing the uptime, etc., they are putting it under the central data org, under the head of data analytics rather than the tech org. There are two major reasons for it. The first is this principle of one throat to choke, right? Where as long as I have any problems with data, if I do not have data engineering and analytics sitting under the same leadership, they keep blaming each other. The analytics team says I do not have the right data. The data engineering team says I do not have the right specifications for the data that I was asked to bring in. I have done what was asked and go through the process, and you not define the process, etc., etc. Just to stop that organizational dynamic, it works very well to have them under one central leader, number one. Number two, the analytics team actually interfaces more with the business than the tech team, and they understand. So there is this concept of domain over data, where you're not just bringing every single piece of data that every source system is generating and putting it into your data platform, but you're only bringing in those pieces of data which have a connection to a solution to a specific business problem, right? So for example, I'll give an example. There is a client of mine, it's a general insurance company. They have a core, the core pass that they have. In its application database, there are 2,000 tables. Right? There are 2,000 tables, there's about 30 terabytes of data. Any guesses on the actual number of tables that they use to run their entire BI out of those 2,000 tables? I got a number 20 to 40%. They use 300 tables, which is about 15%, right? Now, if I did not, and it is because they've got use case by use case, use case by use case, and left all of the data which is not relevant to a business use case in the source table itself, not duplicated storage, not incur the cost. That is the second reason why folks are realizing that the data engineering team better sits within the data team than the tech team. And the third, obviously, this is not true for the analytics org alone, it's true for any org that you're trying to create, which is you have to create the right culture and value prop. Very important for people who are setting up orgs, right? That instead of going and into POCs, which a year down the line, there is no answer to the show me the money question, use very specific, be very, very thoughtful about the use cases you pick up, right? Typically pick up use cases that have a direct impact on either bottom line or top line. And folks are avoiding use cases like customer segmentation, which looks very fancy, but when you actually try to see how many customer segmentations are used in marketing campaigns and you can actually attribute incremental marketing ROI to that customer segmentation, it is a war that you cannot fight and you cannot win. You will not be able to prove to marketing or finance that because of this customer segmentation. On the other hand, if you have a direct marketing support model, you can very easily do an experiment with a test versus control, see the lift, apply that lift to the overall population and say, 10% of all incremental revenues because of the model. So they're choosing the first use cases very thoughtfully, right? This is nothing special. This is just about the standard going after the low-hanging fruit to begin with, to build the trust in the system before you go on. So they're avoiding things like customer segmentation. They're avoiding things like customer lifetime value, which look very cool on paper, but when you try to see how you can generate returns out of them, it's a very difficult question to answer. The third thing that people are realizing is the value of change management. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is the amount of time, effort, and energy that you're going to expend on your analytics journey, on your data science journey when you're setting it up. 70% of it should be budgeted for change management, about less than 30% for development and deployment of the analytical solution. I'll give you an example. Another client of mine, Indian retail bank, for its size, probably investing 3x as compared to its peers on the data platform. They did a hyper-personalization engine, right? So the hyper-personalization engine for every customer creates a product propensity, a channel propensity, and a offer propensity, and says that, Deepayan should get a credit card offer with a 10% off on balance transfer via WhatsApp, whereas somebody else should get a 20 lakh personal loan with a special 3 EMI holiday offer via SMS, right? That's the level of personalization this engine does. The entire exercise was done, a very beautiful system was built from scratch. There's an offer mart, there's a multi-arm bandit based testing environment, but except for the savings account products, nobody else climbed onto that platform. And the reason was, if you realize, any optimization will probably reduce local minima, local maxima, and improve global maxima. So what this engine is trying to do is trying to maximize returns at the customer level, which might mean that for the credit card portfolio, you might actually see a reduction because we have determined that more of my customers need home loans as compared to credit cards. This is not palatable to the credit card business unit leader, right? Because they are getting incentivized on their own balance sheet, on their own P&L, on their own revenue achievement against target. And hence they found reasons to prevent coming on to that personalization. It was only when throughout the organization, the CEO brought in a customer charter and started to measure customer level revenue as the metric and aligned every single business to say that if we hit customer level revenue of, let's say, whatever, 5,000 rupees per customer per year, irrespective of where it comes from, as long as you are adhering to the principles of the personalization engine, you would have been considered to met your target to a large extent, even if the beginning of the year, whatever target was set up in the EOP, you're short of it by a couple of percentage points, right? That change management then drove down the behavior that I benefit by allowing my campaigns to be on the personalization engine. And once it does, you realize that your ROI really improves a lot, right? Instead of sending out 45 messages earlier, which cost you a certain amount of money, now you're only sending out 25 and only probably getting 5% lower revenue. And that's actually working positively for your P&L. So that is the value of working on change management. The model is not different. The tech stack is not different. It's just that you worked on the incentive structures within the organization, aligned them to what the model is trying to recommend to, and only then do you see adoption of this cool technology across you. The last one, upfront, people are paying a lot of attention to responsible AI, right? And that is, again, so what does that mean? Which means that you try and unblack box as many models as possible. Do not try to, just adopt a model even though the fit measures might be better if you do not fully understand the causal factors behind it. And people have seen what has happened. Amazon had an issue with the United States government finding it because their routing algorithm prevented shippings from happening to some areas which had a minority population, right? Because these were deemed as unsafe. There was a camera manufacturer which when you take a picture, it pops out a message after analyzing the faces of everyone in the picture, which says that somebody blinked, right? You've seen that, did somebody blink, and it encourages you to take another picture. Now, as it so happened, they trained the data set for that only on Caucasian faces. East Asians have smaller eyes, and when they're smiling, the model was basically recognizing that as a blink, as a closed eye rather than a regular eye, because you had not trained a data on unbiased data sets. That caused a huge issue of systematic racial bias within the AI algorithm. Folks realize that, especially in financial services, the regulators are going to come down very heavily on you if they perceive that some customers are being persecuted or are being persecuted or discriminated against because of AI algorithms. So people are really taking a very early look. They're setting up responsible AI councils, especially anything to do with biometrics, facial recognitions or any other biometrics. They're making sure it goes through a very tough, rigorous and all-encompassing legal process so that before you put it out there in the market, you're covering all your bases with respect to future legal liabilities. So again, on the organization, I think I kind of talked about it. Where do you place the analytics team organizationally, right? So most successful orgs are placing it more centrally. What they're doing, however, is that you realize that, there are some tasks which are very simple data pools, very simple operational MISs, which they don't add a lot of value to the business functions, because the business function knows exactly what data they need, they know exactly the kind of report they need. These are simple reports. And these are not reports which are used to report performance to the executive management, right? So what they're doing is they're centralizing most of the key functions like executive management reporting, modeling, model deployment, data platform decisions, etc., and allowing business units to take the calls on and develop teams which are doing very, very transactional related kind of analytics on the data. In terms of structuring the org, the most successful orgs are mirroring the business org within the analytics org. So if my business org is set up by channel, the insurance client I talked about, they are set up by channel. So banks is one channel, and online distributors are one channel. So they've taken their analytics org and they have oriented it. So the bank channel has an analytics counterpart and the online channel has an analytics counterpart. On the other hand, for retail banks, they have oriented them around business units. So personal loan have a analytics counterpart, credit cards have a personal, collections as a unit has a personal, has a analytics counterpart. The effect of that is that the reason for that is primarily prioritization does not run into competing priorities across departments. If there is a team which is only working with one of my business stakeholders, all their prioritization is done by that business stakeholder themselves, and you do not have to get in and play peacemaker when the marketing guy says that, you know what, instead of doing my projects, you've been doing projects for supply chain. And in terms of the key roles, this is where I mentioned that the data engineering teams have also started getting included into the analytics team rather than left as part of the. So next, so this is just a diagrammatic representation. This part is where folks are concentrating. So this is extreme decentralized, completely federated, that is completely centralized. Hub and spoke with the hub as kind of a doer and federating out the rest of it, that is where most people are kind of pivoting towards, most successful people. The other thing about why federation is a little bit of a problem is that analytics also has a governance function. It needs to talk to senior management about how well a particular organization is doing, how well is marketing performing. And if you have a federated system, there is a conflict of interest there. If my annual appraisal, my bonus is dependent upon the CMO's appraisal of my work, I am hardly going to go and list out the 25 campaigns that did not work, right? So that governance function is best executed in the center. We realize that, and hence a lot of these organizations are then pushing analytics more and more to the center. Lastly, very importantly, what is a what is a employee value proposition that you're bringing in? See, there are lots of points put in here, but primarily, the primary difference I see is these organizations are ensuring that your analytics and data org is not seen as a support organization, is not seen as a backroom boy, is not seen as somebody that just provides a piece of data to a business owner who then goes ahead and takes the decisions. There is significant amount of green lighting, there's significant amount of weight of opinion of the analytics team's recommendations given in key business decisions. Talk about the initial use cases, right? Do not go down the route of customer lifetime value or customer segmentation, because you are not able to figure out what is the specific clearly defined business problem it's solving, right? What is the specific decision it is going to support? It's a little bit out there, it's good to know, but difficult to implement in real life. So attack something which, like promotion pricing, build models which give a recommendation for a daily discount level given an optimization function. Maximization of revenue subject to margin, or maximization of margin subject to some revenue, right? Build something like that which can be used directly by the sales team to take a business decision. Very easy to measure, because you can take this call on a set of control products, not take the call on a set of control products, see the lift you're getting over BAU, right? And these are some metrics that you should use. These are metrics people are using. Essentially, if you look at all of them, this is the low-hanging fruit principle. What has high value? What has ease of implementation? Focus on those at first. And very, very important, the box at the bottom. do not get into a business problem where just getting all the data is going to be a issue for you. Figure out those problems where data is already present in a largely analyzable, high quality format, so that you're not fighting the data availability battle at the same time where you have promised ROI in 6 months to the CEO. So change management, right? And this is something we have seen continuously across most of our clients, where you get hit by the stuff in the bottom, which I talked about in case of the personalization model. They'd spend hundreds of crores building up the personalization model, and except for the liabilities business, folks were not getting on top of it. So people who are now getting savvy at this, what they're doing is, if they have a 1-year plan to deliver value, they realize that only a couple of months have to be devoted in that plan to the actual building of the product. The rest of the time actually has to be in productionization, adoption, and ensuring scalability of the solution when it gets to market. Finally, I talked about responsible AI. I talked about why it is much smarter to prevent irresponsible black box models from getting inside your data stack upfront, to prevent legal liabilities in future. So what does responsible AI even mean, right? So essentially, if you look at it, the two words which are important from all of the words out there are transparent and beneficial. So the transparency is very, very important, especially, and I'm repeating this again, when it comes to using biometrics. What sort of algorithm is being used? What are the parameters on which the algorithm is taking a certain decision? Those need to be completely unblack boxed and clear to at least the internal stakeholders before you actually roll out the model. So with this, my slides are done. Glad to take any questions if there were any. And I see most of you are.
Can you elaborate on the change management side? What exactly you're trying to address there?
Sure. So I'll just go back to the example that I said, right? Where there was this client where I said where we developed a hyper-personalization engine for them. So that hyper-personalization engine was supposed to improve the marketing ROI by only giving you as a customer those campaigns that you are most likely to respond to, right? So before that, before it was set up, there were different business units in the organization. Each business unit had its own marketing budget, and hence they were sending out their individual marketing campaigns. So each business unit would send out as many marketing campaigns as it was required for them to meet their business target. What it led to was, at the outer end, at the 95th percentile of customers that were receiving, they were getting 95 messages per month, which means that you were getting 3 messages per day from the bank every single day in the month, right? Which has a longer term problem. The longer term problem is that customers start getting turned off, your overall marketing response goes down. So this is a problem. This is what personalization is supposed to solve. Solution works perfectly technologically. There is no adoption in the business apart from one business unit. And that one business unit does it because it's actually the smallest business unit, which is the least to lose. And that was because at a global level, every single, if you followed the recommendations of the algorithm, every single business unit would have had to reduce their individual number of messages that they sent out. In the short term, it would have shown up as a revenue loss. In the long term, customer churn would have reduced and the money would have come in. It's not necessary that the money would have come into that same business unit though, right? Business units were not incentivized at a customer level. They were incentivized at their product line level, and hence they did not adopt this. And when the organization realized this, they really spent time to ensure, as I said, that you get the org to pivot towards customer level revenue. And if the org meets customer level revenue, then every single business unit which has adhered to this centrally accepted or recommended levels of one-to-one marketing gets their incentive irrespective of whether they would have fallen short of their own individual target by a certain amount, right? So that is the change management that happened. So that is an example to illustrate the point that when you do this analytical solution, right, one has to actually think through what will be the blockers to adoption at my stakeholder level and start solving for them upfront. If needed with organization changes, if needed with education, if needed with incentives, alignments, etc. However you do it, you have to do it. Otherwise, the best technical solution does not get adopted in them.
So, Dipan, my question is related to attribution. Let's say the data team builds a fantastic data-driven solution to improve sales productivity. Now, the sales team, the head of sales, they are themselves doing a lot of things to again improve the productivity. And we also come in, we also launch a particular solution. And how do you attribute the delta to the data-driven solution and not to the other activities that are happening? Especially, this becomes a problem in B2B business because setting up test and control becomes very critical. Let's say that overall TAM itself is 20,000 clients in India, let's say mid-corporate segment, or even let's say number of schools. That is very limited. I cannot do a test and control just because the number of customers, the market is so limited. And that is where I feel attribution becomes very challenging because the sales team says, no, we did XYZ things that drove the change and not really, let's say, a propensity model that you build. So specifically for a B2B business unit, how do you solve for attribution?
Great question. I'm not sure whether I have a very clear answer for you, Mohan, right? Because see, at the end of the day, you also know that until you're able to isolate two groups where there is only one differentiating factor between them, there will be confounding effects. There's just no way to, or you have to observe it over time and then like a market mix, in a market mix sort of a mode, build multivariate, but that will require like 12 months of data, 24 months of data, and typically people will not. So I do not have an answer to your question. Going back to what I started off here, right, that would be a classic example of a type of an engagement which you probably should not do as your first few use cases. So the trap to avoid over there is trying to do something where attribution is very difficult to achieve while you are still establishing the equity of your business unit within the larger org, right? See, at a point in time when your equity within the org is established, then in all probability something like this is coming as a pull from the business user themselves, and then there is probably less of a push to kind of, you know, do attribution, or even an agreement that these are these 25 clients where we'll try this out and we'll treat it as a control variable, or a willingness to observe results over a larger period of 6 months where you take weekly data and try to do a multivariate kind of analysis to find out the individual beta coefficient there to then say, this is my attribution model. Multiple ways of skinning the cat. I don't have a perfect answer there, especially B2B is something which I personally have not seen a lot of success there. But going back to the point, that should not be something that you should pick up first.
Thanks.
I think there's one question in the back.
Oh, okay. So hi, Dipan. First of all, it's a really great explanation, and it's something which is our pain point as well. So let me stand so you can see.
Okay, yeah. I was kind of wondering where it's coming from.
Yeah, it's, thanks to the speaker. First of all, it's a beautiful presentation. I think it's the same pain point we have been dealing, and I will be asking from the behalf of head of analytics here as well from Coca-Cola and similar company. And my question actually kind of echo what the previous question was. When we centralize this kind of activities, we often face the issue of the quantification of, you know, you did it or I did. So business may say that it is our project, analytics would say it's our project, and the push and pull happen. When it becomes to the business, then the problem of skilling comes, capability comes. You cannot have a data scientist, a data engineer, data analyst, a business analyst all in the same team and replicate it of the same with the B unit. I know it's not easy to answer, but what do you think should be most sustainable solution for this to remove the push and pull between centralized versus decentralized or analytics versus business fight? So how do you do that? I'm not, if it is not clear, I can repeat or paraphrase it, but free to answer, please.
Let me try and understand, I mean, restate your question. You can tell me if I got it right.
Yes.
So I think what you're asking is that businesses would always like analytics functions to be federated. Analytics functions themselves would always want to be centralized.
Absolutely.
If the analytics function is centralized, there will always be a push and pull as to what did the data function contribute compared to what the business function did basis, and how to resolve that.
Idea versus execution.
You know, I wish I had a very clear answer to that. You know, I'd be a multi-millionaire. But sorry for that. But see, one of two things. One is, I don't think a federated model works at all, especially from a talent retention perspective.
Correct.
Especially from your point of view, I as an executive management member would not trust numbers coming out of federated model which are talking about the success of initiatives that have been taken, because it's basically just a maker-checker problem over there, right? I mean, I did the initiative, I am rating the initiative, and I'm calling it a success.
Yep.
So a lot of this actually has, it has to come from the CXO layer, where the CEO, CFO, CTO, etc. sit down with the functional leaders and agree upon the fact that for the company's best, this is the way that, you know.
But don't you think that lobbying every time for each and every idea, let's say for example, I come up with some idea, I found something.
I think
it's a discussion, not an argument, by the way.
It's a deeper, there's a deeper issue that's happening, right? I mean, there is something, this is a symptom of a more lack of cooperative working or between the organization. So I don't think you can actually solve this problem technically. You know, that this is an organizational problem that has to be solved organizationally by either there are people involved who are not able to gel with each other, or there are active processes that I have put in place which are causing people to have misaligned incentives, etc. So one of those things, probably others as well. I'm not again an organizational behavior and structure expert, but my guess is what you're putting in is actually not a technical problem, because I've seen the reverse. I've seen the reverse in very well functioning organizations. My ex-organization Flipkart and Myntra, we almost never had that problem, right? And that was also because most of the people had joined the company when it was already accepted that ek saath kaam karna hai. And we work together.
I would say that there's a disconnect here, because the Flipkart or Myntra, these companies were set up from the technical mindset, and the companies maybe I'm talking about was set up from the business mindset. So when you try to pitch a technical idea to a business mindset, the hindrance, the friction will always be.
That's a great point, right? So that's where the change management piece, so the standard pieces of finding out one or two sponsors, who are those people who would stick them, who are probably more forward thinking, have either come from a more digitally native or whatever, they have gone out and seen what benefits can come from a market. So that is the standard change management process where you find one or two sponsors. They are the ones who then rest the case that interacting with this central organization has helped me achieve my goals with a lower amount of financial investment than I either would have. And believe me, once people realize that what you do leads to a bottom line or a top line benefit, right, then it is very hard to solve the supply problem. Because ultimately, if they realize that it is going to happen, right, a lot of this push and pull probably happens because they don't even trust that your models are generating. If
ultimately, as I said, it's the quantification, it's the credit maybe. Anyway, I got your point, what you're trying to say. Ultimate answer is the lobbying. So if I have to pitch in my idea
so
to
as you said, I mean, if it's a lobbying related problem, you'll have to solve it using a lobbying.
Yeah, my idea. Thanks a lot. I said it's a discussion, not an argument. So thank you.
I think in the interest of time, we'll take a final question.
Thank you for a great presentation. I have a question regarding ownership, I think. As you know, I come from a global pharma company with 50,000 employees, and right now we see so much value in data science, just the value creation, that I think we see ownership everywhere. It's both local, globally, and in all business functions, basically, in the tech and with the data science organization as well. So the question is, because now you've been working with this in the US, you've also been working with it in India, and we have a huge area here in the company in India. So I'm thinking about if we should place our bets going forward on where should we place the ownership. What is your perspective on? We could place it here in India, we could place it in US, we could place it somewhere in Europe, or we could have a mix of all of it.
Sorry, Jacob, just so I understand, you're talking about where do you put the central organization serving a global multinational organization?
Yes, if we should place it centrally. Yeah, because it could also, I'm talking also about the capabilities, what you see in the Indian market based on, or compared to the US or European market.
So, see, I have been part of units at HSBC where there were a central unit in India. I think there also a hybrid model works better because see, analytics and data science at the end of the day is a techno-commercial function. It's not a pure technical function, right? And one of the, I think to use some just conceptual notes, one of the things that I have seen work best in driving change and driving success is when the analytics team is seen as what we used to call the trusted business partner by the business team, right? It's not seen as an esoteric ivory tower academician, as I said, who's just giving me some algorithms. They are seen as a business partner who understands what my business needs and giving me a technology-led solution at the back of which is an algorithm which helps solve my problem. So if my problem at the end of the day, I'm a supply chain guy, my problem is my cost of shipping one unit is 200 rupees. They have given me a solution of a routing algorithm which has brought that down from 200 rupees to 180 rupees, right? That has to be established. That is very difficult to establish in a geo-remote to begin with. So to your question, I know there is lack of talent availability maybe in some of the markets, but what I've seen best is there are roles within an analytics team which require a lot of interaction with the business, right? So if you look at an analytics project or a process, you have business understanding, data prep, modeling, validation, deployment, and testing and deployment, right? Guys who are doing the business understanding and the data understanding and guys who are doing the deployment, I think those teams, those people always and always should be in the geography. It just helps. It's very difficult to sit in a remote market if I have not worked in that particular geography, understand the nuances of the market, understand the needs of that org in that particular quarter, 6 monthly period, etc. The middle part, if you're able to break, and the beauty of analytics is you can actually, modularize stuff. So there is a person who can do business. There is this process called CRISP-DM, cross-industry standard practices in data mining, which actually talks about handovers between each of these processes, right? So I can do data understanding, hand over the process to you, you can do the data prep, the modeling, the testing, and the validation, hand over the code to me for deployment, there. And I'm not talking about technical deployment, which can be done, but actual testing, actual taking the customer through the solution, taking the feedback, iterating, etc. So again, to repeat, I think it should be a mix where you can have the folks who are going from data preparation to modeling and validation sitting in a center, because there you essentially are, spending 2-3 weeks working with data and generating outputs, but at the business understanding, data understanding phase and the deployment phase needs to be done locally.
One final question for sure.
Hi Deepan, this is Shakti. Maybe the last question is, we talked about the data analytics and all. So one of the classic problem what we have seen personally, that marrying the historical data, the legacy data, with the present ecosystem, the way we are thinking that we're bringing the data mining and data analytics. If it is a kind of an outsourced model, and the vendor is not legally obligated to give the data, now getting the raw data from them and then massaging the data to basically produce it in a meaningful object is a real challenge, which we have seen that okay, giving the data is fine, but giving the junk data and then possibly without knowing the ER relationship and all, going to the next level of analytics is becoming very tough. We have struggled a lot. Just what is your thought in this?
That's a real problem. I don't have because see, if your GIGO is one of the oldest terms in computing, right? So I don't understand the particular context, obviously, that you have, Shakti, but I cannot imagine that a vendor would not be able to share your own data. I don't know. Again, as I said, there could be a case. So then basically the mistake has been made in the contracting process somehow, where you've not put in enough clauses that this is my IP, this is not your IP. I mean, you're just a custodian of that IP for as long as I choose you to be, right? Yeah, so in all probability, it's a contractual error, and it is a very costly error. I mean, if your data is held by somebody who's not going to give to you and you have no recourse to get it out. And I understand, so they have stored it in a format, there is no master data, so the answer to that is, I guess, when you're setting up these engagements, one needs to just think 5 years ahead, that ultimately I am the owner of this. So when you're setting up my data environment, master data management, catalog management, observability, lineage, these are standard builds into the contract that you have to adhere to them, and the data cannot be inaccessible from me as the client in any ways, right? I mean, I have to have access, even if you're putting it in tertiary storage, if you're putting it in archive, I need to have the keys to that. So, I mean, I have not thankfully come across a situation, but I'm sure you are struggling with this. And I don't even know how to work back, right? And unless you probably give them a fresh contract and hand that over as an incentive for them to release the older data, I can't. But yeah, see, today in cloud data sources, the MDM and cataloging, they have standard very powerful tools, like AWS will have glue catalog, and Informatica and all will build proper. So it's important to kind of invest in those technologies, because as you said, at a future point in time, nobody will be able to crawl through 500 tables and figure out what one variable means and what the other means if I do not have that master data captured somewhere.
I think you did a more than good job in
Thank you,
making
Deeksha.
sure everybody was awake.